I went to a camp. I read an ad in the paper. I was 18. I never gone to a camp in my life because my parents couldn't send me, so I didn't even know what a summer camp was like. And I read they were looking for a dance teacher, and I loved to dance. Never took dancing lessons. And they interviewed me, and they hired me. I went to the library, and I got lots of books on different dance, and I took them with me, and I went to this camp. And of course, I didn't really know what a camp dance instructor was supposed to do. Well, you see, I was like a free spirit. And so I put on music, and I say, how do we feel? Let's do it. I wasn't teaching steps or tap, or I don't even know what they expected of me, to be honest with you, today. For 2 weeks, they put up with me, and then they fired me and sent me home. And that's when I applied for the job that I met George. So you see, a lot of negative things that can happen to you in life can kind of get turned around. So remember that.
I was employed at a camp as a camp counselor for children, which was a family camp. Well, during that first month of the summer season, one of our counselors had to leave, and we were shorthanded, and we needed to replace the one who left. And so we found out that there was a young person in New York who was a member of a family that knew a family at the camp who might be interested. And then the decision was made to hire the applicant.
Who was Lucille Kogan.
And I was introduced to her by the director when they picked me up, and we were going to drive back to Connecticut to the campsite. On the way, since I lived in Stamford, Connecticut, my family was there, we decided we would stop there and have a bite to eat. So Lucille had an opportunity at that point not only to meet me for the first time, but even to meet my parents.
Oh, and let me just add that George had just come back from a year of study in England as an exchange student. And he was in education, and so was I. So I was very interested and very impressed by this young man who had just spent a year abroad studying education in Britain. And so we had a lot of things to talk about.
Well, after we had a little visit, my mother took me aside and said, you know, I think that's the girl for you. So we kept up our friendship.
He was my first boyfriend, and I'm still stuck with him 66 years later.
Yeah. The war ended, and I was offered by my agency a transfer to our regional office in San Francisco. And it sounded attractive to us to come to California, and we took off and made an automobile journey across the country.
We had a wonderful adventure.
Took our dog, and we arrived in San Francisco on the very day that the Japanese War ended, VJ Day.
And it was crazy.
In August 1945. And that was when we became Californians.
But no, we became California. We were driving this old jalopy with our dog in the back. And have you ever been to Lake Tahoe? The
No.
emerald blue of the lake,
No.
and the mountains behind it. Anyway, it's spectacular. It's one of the wonders of the world.
It's on the border.
And it's right on the border between Nevada and California. So we drove up, and it was a very gorgeous day. It was August 15th. That's the
I
day.
said in August.
Yeah. And I looked out at that scene, and I said to George, this is where I was born. I said, I'm a Californian this minute. I remember it. It was, it was really like a soul reaching out. And I haven't regretted it since.
So we actually bought our first
We
house.
bought a 2-bedroom, one bath for $6,000 with $700 down that we had saved.
And that was the house that
And that was the house that Llewellyn was born to.
That's right.
But before she was born, this was August, I had a teaching credential, or I had teacher training. I didn't have a credential in this state. But they needed teachers desperately everywhere. So I went to the local school district where we bought the house and applied and immediately got a job to teach 6th grade, American history, which was my...
It was 8th grade.
No. Oh, maybe you're right. Maybe. 8th. It was American history that sold them on me because that was my major. And I started teaching immediately in September. We got there in August and September. And I had a family living in Los Angeles all this time that I vaguely remembered. I called them and said, I'm going to be off for Christmas holiday. Could we come down to visit? And we did. It was love at first sight, mutual. We just, clicked. They loved George.
On New Year's Day, we were picking oranges off their tree.
For a New Yorker, you know what that means. We were fascinated.
But the one thing we did was we made the trip, and in all this excitement, Lucille forgot to take her diaphragm. And as a result...
And we got drunk New Year's Eve.
We were drinking champagne.
On champagne.
And
and Llewellyn was born to the day, September 29th, 9 months later.
Sleeping together.
That's how we celebrated New Year's. But the interesting thing, while we're talking about that, it runs in the family. I was born because my mother got drunk on champagne. We all have September birthdays.
Right.
And so I was born on the 24th.
Your
My sister was born on the 25th. And Llewellyn was born on the 29th of September. So we were all New Year's Eve babies. The other thing that happened just before Llewellyn was born, I have a sister who is 6 years younger than I. She was my birthday present. On my 6th birthday, my mother went to the hospital to deliver her. When we got settled and bought this little house with 2 bedrooms, she came out and she finished college at UC Berkeley. And then she met Nate, her husband. And so we really started a whole new generation, a California generation. And so the 4 grandparents were all out here for all those wonderful years while the grandchildren were growing up.
After we pioneered the move. Actually, I have to go back to my childhood days in growing up in the Bronx, New York, and becoming, as a young kid, a baseball fan. And because I lived in the Bronx, I was supposed to be a Yankee fan because the Yankees played in the Bronx. But as I looked at it, I felt that I was not a Yankee fan. I was a Giant fan, and they played in Manhattan at the old Polo Grounds. And so I would be the cast out in our neighborhood as being Giant fan with all the other kids being Yankee fans. Well, that didn't bother me.
And your mother wanted you to be a pianist, so you took piano lessons and you had to practice every day. She'd have to send somebody out to bring you in from the baseball.
Well, when the teacher came for my lesson, they had to send somebody to bring me home so I can take my piano lesson.
Because he was out playing baseball.
Because I was involved with playing a game.
And then they followed you to San Francisco.
Yes, we moved to California, and I think it was 2 years later, they decided to relocate and came to San Francisco, where I was living. And so to my joy, my home team followed me out to the West Coast, and I've been rooting for them ever since.
You know, these are the things that make a family. Because George and I loved music and both played the piano, we used to play duets long after we were married. Well, then we had children. First there was Llewellyn, and then there was Jeff. So they would be at the piano with Grandpa, with Daddy. He was Daddy. Then we had a grandson, Michael, who didn't play the piano but played the recorder. And so when he came to visit us, which was very often in Palo Alto, we had a baby grand piano. Grandpa would play the music and Michael would play with him. And then we had a granddaughter, Leah. And when she was, I guess, it looks like about 2 or 3, there she is at her piano with Grandpa. So that makes 3 generations of enjoying music, and all 3 generations still do.
The question was asked of me, how come you're so interested in opera? It was Saturday morning opera from the Met on the radio. So I gave them a little story about Lucille's parents and my parents being of the culture that encompassed knowledge about opera. How her had a relative who was connected with the Metropolitan Opera Company in New York and got the Kogan family able to go to the opera.
They got us box, when a box was empty, my parents could not ever afford to buy an opera ticket. But I went to every opera you can imagine on a last-minute basis.
And then now they gave you birthday parties on stage.
Yeah. They gave me a gift that they weren't even aware was such a significant gift. They fed us culture. And I'll never be able to, forget that.
Things like that get passed down. And, it all depends on where you come from and who you come from.
That's right, that's right.
And my
then
parents...
my good luck was that I found a young man whose parents were exactly the same. We could have been brother and sister as well as husband and wife. And now we're each a half of a whole person. Our interests have always been so mutual. Our passions, our politics, we've been political junkies since our teens. It was really kind of a little miracle. So, George will be 91 this June, and I will be 87 next September. And in October will be our 67th wedding anniversary. It's been a good life. You know, the best part of any experience between people is when it's mutual. And our life has been so rich with mutuality, whether it's with our children or our grandchildren. How lucky can you get? Right?
That's true.
Okay,
Right on.
right on.